An elderly black woman, modestly dressed, walked into a bank to withdraw money. Suddenly, a young white teller refused to serve her. They looked down on her, mocked her, and even the branch manager threatened to throw her out. Everything changed when a powerful man walked in and revealed her true identity to everyone in the lobby. That moment would transform the entire bank. Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. It was just after 9 on the first Tuesday. It was the third Friday of the month when the glass doors of Bank South in Florence slid open with a soft hiss, and Martha Coleman stepped inside. At 72, she moved with the deliberate pace of someone whose body had learned not to rush, especially in rooms like this. Her cardigan was a maroon knit, faded and fraying at the cuffs. A teal scarf hung loose around her neck, the edges curled with wear. Her shoes were the kind sold more for comfort than style, soles worn smooth. In her hand, folded with care, was a piece of paper. A disbursement order from the Lightbridge Foundation, a fund she'd co-founded 20 years ago to feed families in her church community. A cooled draft lingered by the entrance, brushing past the folds of her scarf. The marble tile floors gleamed beneath the tall windows, and the sun streaming in drew long, clean shadows across the floor and the wooden trim of the teller's counter. The scent of polish hung faintly in the air. Near the front desk stood a small whiteboard sign on an easel. Today's meeting. Lightbridge Foundation, 10 Honquak a.m., staff only. The staff had seen the notice all morning, but few knew the faces behind the names, especially not tellers like Emily, who weren't looped into internal meetings. Martha's eyes lingered on the sign. Her fingers touched the edge of her scarf, adjusting it without urgency. She stood a moment longer, then moved forward. "Hope they got it right this time," she murmured, more breath than words. Only one teller was on duty. A white woman in her 20s with a sleek ponytail, thick mascara, and a name tag that read Emily Harper. Her posture was upright, nails manicured, lips pressed in focus, until she noticed Martha approaching. Emily had been reprimanded last week for missing a fraudulent withdrawal, and her eyes sharpened with caution the moment she looked up. Something in her gaze shifted, small but unmistakable. Her eyes moved over Martha's cardigan, the worn scarf, the orthopedic shoes. One brow lifted a fraction. Her fingers paused mid-air above the keyboard. Her jaw moved, almost to herself. "Here we go again." The words weren't loud, but they weren't hushed either. In the quiet lobby, they floated for a second longer than they should have. A man at the deposit box didn't look up. A young woman flipping through loan pamphlets didn't pause her scrolling, but the air shifted. Martha kept walking, her shoes making soft, scuffing sounds against the tile. At the counter, she placed the paper down gently, smoothing it with 2 fingers. "I'd like to confirm a withdrawal request. Through Lightbridge, please." Emily blinked, then raised an eyebrow. Not quite confusion, not quite contempt. "Is this your account?" Martha nodded once. Her voice remained steady. Yes. I was told this disbursement was ready for withdrawal. Emily held the paper between two fingertips, unfolding it without urgency. Her eyes skimmed the form, then stopped. A nearly imperceptible frown tightened her lips. The bank's new system had been glitchy since the last update, erasing names from fund directories, and after last week's fraud incident, Emily wasn't about to take any chances. She turned to her screen with a sigh, not loud, but unmistakably deliberate. Her manicured fingers clacked against the keyboard, louder than necessary, as she began clicking through the menus. Martha stood still, hands loosely clasped. The sunlight from the window hit the glass partition, casting a bright bar across her face. She didn't flinch, but her eyes flicked once toward the parking lot outside, where a familiar Navy sedan had just pulled in. She turned back to the counter just as Emily's typing paused. Emily's eyes narrowed. She didn't sigh, at least not audibly, but the way her shoulders sank said enough. Her fingernail clicked once against the counter before she spoke. "There's a discrepancy here," she said, eyes still glued to the screen. "Your name isn't listed under this fund." She didn't look up. Martha's hand, still resting on the edge of the counter, curled slightly. Her thumb moved in a slow, deliberate circle over her knuckle. "That's the disbursement notice," she said quietly, "from the Lightbridge Fund." Emily tilted her monitor slightly, as if to shield it more fully, eyes skimming across columns of data. "Well, I don't see your name anywhere. We only process these when every field aligns." Martha leaned forward, just enough for her voice to land closer to the glass, warm but unwavering. "It's under internal designation. Check Batch 7, authorized disbursements." A dry laugh, almost just a breath, escaped Emily's lips. "That's not how this works, ma'am." She leaned back in her chair, typing something into the keyboard with exaggerated care. Martha lifted her fingers and tapped the paper once, gentle but unmistakably intentional. "I've done this before," she said. "Please check again." Emily didn't reach for the slip. Her back straightened, lips tightening, voice clipped. "I'll call my manager. We'll verify this properly." She pressed a button beneath the desk, discreet but firm. A few moments later, an office door creaked open. Brian Harris stepped out. He looked to be in his mid-30s, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit. Everything about him, from the crisp collar to the deliberate cadence of his walk, said he valued procedure more than patience. "What's the issue, Emily?" he asked, a note of weariness already in his voice. "A disbursement form for the Lightbridge Fund," Emily explained. "Name's not in the system directory. Customer requested we check Batch 7 manually." Harris stepped up to the counter. He didn't look at Martha right away. Instead, he took the paper from Emily's hand. His eyes moved quickly across the letterhead, the signature, the figure. Then he turned to Emily's screen, scanning the data with a sharp, practiced eye. He clicked through several tabs himself, brow tightening. The bank's new system had been glitchy, but after last week's elaborate fraud attempt, Harris wasn't in the mood to take risks. A system error was possible, but a scam attempt felt more likely. His gaze finally dropped to Martha. It wasn't just a glance. It was a full sweep, from her worn cardigan to the frayed canvas bag in her hand. In Harris's mind, every red flag was waving. He placed the paper back on the counter. The professionalism in his posture had cooled into skepticism. "The system is the source of truth, ma'am," Harris said, his voice firm and final. "If your name isn't in it, we can't proceed, especially after the security breach last week." Martha's posture didn't shift, but her jaw tightened. "I'm not here to argue," she said. "I am asking for what was entrusted." Harris slid the slip toward Emily. "Hold on to it. We'll need to verify with the fund rep." Emily took it, her lips twitching slightly in restraint. Martha's eyes didn't leave the paper. "That document came from my office," she said. Her voice remained even, but something sharp and fragile ran beneath it. "I helped write the first check that fund ever signed." A quiet scoff slipped from Emily. Not loud, but sharp enough to cut. Bolstered by her manager's stance, she added, "Well, we can't just take anyone's word for it. For all we know, this could be forged." The word dropped like glass shattering on tile. Martha's fingers stiffened. Her other hand gripped her bag, the leather strap pressing white lines into her palm. She didn't blink. She took a breath, not deep but deliberate, and looked Harris straight in the eye. "I will not leave without that slip," she said, "or a written explanation." Harris looked toward the back. "There's no need to make this difficult, ma'am. Just leave the document, and we'll handle it internally." He didn't raise his voice, but his tone carried a finality that left no room for questions. Behind Martha, the security guard shifted, not from noise but because Harris's glance had lingered long enough, a presence that could no longer be ignored. Emily's fingers hovered near the edge of the counter, close to the black button that needed no label. The silence settled like a verdict. "This isn't a favor I'm asking. It's my name, my signature. You can call the foundation. There's a meeting scheduled this morning. Someone can verify it." Harris sighed, already half turned away. "It's not our job to verify walk-ins, ma'am. We go by what's in the system." "I helped found that fund," Martha said, her voice softer now. "Lightbridge started in my church basement. We served food off folding tables and kept receipts in a shoebox. That signature on the paper, that's the same hand that signed the first check we ever wrote." No one replied. Martha reached forward, not fast, not forceful, but with the quiet resolve of someone who had been dismissed too many times. Her fingertips brushed the edge of the paper. "This paper is my property, young man," she said, her voice a little shaky but firm. and it matters." Harris narrowed his eyes, a flicker of impatience crossing his perfectly set features. "Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but this is a bank, not a negotiation table. We have protocols. Either you leave the document, or we'll have to ask you to step outside." "I'm not leaving without it," Martha snapped, her voice rising now, echoing faintly in the quiet lobby. Harris let out an annoyed sigh. "Security," he barked, sharp and commanding, drawing attention from across the room. "This woman is being disruptive. Escort her out." The guard, who had been hovering nearby, now moved with purpose. As he approached, Harris suddenly reached across the counter for the document, intending to swipe it away. But Martha had anticipated him. Her hand shot out, surprisingly quick, slapping down onto the paper just as his fingers grazed the edge. She held it firmly, pinning it to the counter. "Don't you dare," she growled, her voice rough with a surge of anger. Then she yanked it back toward her, sliding it off the polished surface and into her hands, clutching it tightly to her chest. "Don't touch me," she shouted again, her voice cracking with a mix of fear, defiance, and now a flicker of triumph. Harris seized the moment, pointing at her. "She's refusing to comply, and now she's being aggressive," he shouted, his voice loud and theatrical, though Martha hadn't touched him. He stepped back, feigning alarm, his eyes darting to the security guard. He wasn't about to let an elderly woman disrupt his day. "Get her out of here now." A wave of murmurs swept through the small line of customers. The security guard stepped forward, his voice trained calm. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step outside." Martha stood still. Her fingers, slightly numb, lost their grip on the paper. It slipped to the floor. As she bent to retrieve it, her knees cracked, sharp and unforgiving. She winced but said nothing, steadying herself on the edge of the counter. The lobby had grown still. The man in line glanced at the floor and said nothing. A younger woman in a tailored coat turned her shoulder toward the scene, eyes fixed back on her phone. Martha straightened, the paper back in her hand, now slightly crumpled. She turned toward the exit. Her walk to the door was slow, the weight of something unseen settled between her shoulders. Just before the doors, Martha paused. They opened slowly from the outside. A tall man in a tailored navy suit stepped in, gray at the temples, shirt crisp, a leather briefcase tucked under one arm. His stride was confident, but as he stepped into the lobby, his eyes scanned the room with instinctive precision, like someone used to reading tension before hearing it. "Martha?" he called, voice firm but puzzled. "Martha Coleman." She turned slowly, recognition warming her face despite everything. "James," she said. He reached her in a few long strides, but the easy greeting on his lips faltered as he saw the paper crumpled in her hands, the tension in her shoulders, and the security guard a few steps behind her. His eyes, clear but tired, flicked toward the teller counter. James followed her gaze and saw Harris standing stiffly, jaw tight. Emily was rigid behind her screen, not typing, not blinking. The silence, the posture, the shame on Martha's face said more than enough. What happened here? His voice wasn't loud, but it cut clean through the room. Why does it look like Martha's being escorted out? No one answered. Martha offered a tired half-smile. They said I wasn't in the system. James turned slowly, fully now, placing himself between her and the counter. He looked from Harris to Emily, and then to the small group of customers watching in stunned quiet. "This is Martha Coleman," he said. "She co-founded the Lightbridge Foundation. The reason we're all here today." His words dropped like a stone into still water. Near the back, someone whispered, "Co-founder." The room shifted. Postures straightened. Eyes widened. James kept his gaze on the counter, his tone calm but carved from stone. "You may want to check the name on that document again, because the woman you dismissed helped build the very program this bank promotes." Emily blinked. Her face had lost its color. Her hand, still clutching a pen, trembled slightly. She said nothing, but the shape of her regret was visible in the way her shoulders sank. Harris's mouth opened, then closed. When he found his voice, it was thin. "With all due respect," he said, "our protocol requires confirmed records. Her name wasn't in the directory. I was following policy." James turned to him. His voice cooled. "Mr. Harris, I'll be reporting this incident to your regional office. Your tone, your assumptions, and your escalation were inappropriate. I trust they'll handle the rest." Harris went pale. Martha didn't gloat. "I just want the funds to reach the people who need them," she said. James nodded. He sat down and opened his laptop. "I'll be reporting this directly to the regional director. Harris will have to answer for it, and this branch will be facing a full internal review." 12 weeks later, the glass doors of Bank South slid open again. This time, it wasn't silence that greeted the first steps inside, but warmth. Posters along the entry wall displayed a new community initiative, Lightbridge Local Aid Days, in partnership with Bank South. A photo of Martha and James, side by side, stood below the logo. Inside, the lobby had changed, not in paint or layout, but in energy. Emily Harper sat behind the counter again. Her ponytail was the same, but her expression was different, less tightly wound, more attentive. She wore no heavy mascara today. Behind her desk now sat a framed sticky note, "People before process." James had intervened early. Emily was not fired, but she was required to complete bias training, customer empathy workshops, and at Martha's request, volunteer hours at the Lightbridge Weekend Food Program. That first Saturday, she'd arrived in heels. By noon, her hair was a mess, and her shirt speckled with soup stains, but she'd stayed late to mop the church kitchen. Martha hadn't said much, just handed her an apron and quietly asked, "You hungry?" They'd eaten side by side on plastic chairs in silence, over chili and cornbread. No apologies, just presence. Harris, after a leave of absence and a formal hearing, had been reassigned to a compliance desk at regional headquarters. No customer interaction, paperwork only. As for Martha, she never returned to the bank again. She didn't need to. Her legacy was no longer folded in a single piece of paper. It echoed now in every child with a packed lunch, every widow who got her heating bill paid on time. In town meetings, people spoke her name, not with reverence, but with clarity. She showed us where we still had work to do. At 10:07 a.m., a little boy tugged at his mother's sleeve near the counter. "Mama, is that the lady from the poster?" His mother looked over at the display of Martha's photo and nodded. "Yes, baby, that's her." The boy stared a long time, not because he knew her story, but because something about her smile felt safe. Emily watched them from her station. She didn't speak, but her hands no longer hovered above the keyboard, uncertain. They moved with quiet purpose, just like Martha had. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.